So what's next?
Well, I love research. I just started working on the Anacostia River. Now, for many years, I wanted to work on that river because, I mean, it's right in my own backyard. It's my neighborhood. So there are problems there of pollution that I want to be able to impact. And, like I said, it's my neighborhood. So there's a lot of development there. There's a park. There's buildings going up. The whole waterfront area is being developed. It's just exploding there. So it was a chance to learn more about the river. I found a way to write a small grant, and that was in collaboration with River Keepers, which is a citizen watchdog group, which, by the way, is a very cool group of people. Some of the coolest people I've met are in that group. And then also the Department of Environment in D.C. So we've got them, the watchdog group, and our people. And like I said, it's local, but then it has a chance to bring an impact in a wider area. And then I bring the students with me as well, so they get to see how we make an impact with science. It's really amazing. So that work has been really satisfying for me, working with other people. Yeah, so I'm always learning. Just yesterday I was working on a grant proposal that I'm writing, and I don't know much about fish. I'm a microbiologist, so phytoplankton and algae are the things that I work on. So I don't know much about fish at all. In this grant, however, I'm required to, learn something because the community is interested, of course, in fishing. It's food. People want, to be able to eat the fish out of the river. But the fish there have tumors from the pollution. And I'm talking with the Department of Environment. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know much about fish, so you're going to have to tell me. Do they stay in one area? Do they go up and down the river? Where do they get exposed to the algae? So I had to learn a lot. So that was a process. It's always ongoing, learning new things. It's fun, I think.
Wow. I don't even know what to say. What types of things do you see as yourself as a female in the STEM fields?
Oh, great question. One thing is that's nice for me is in biology, the gender split is about 50-50. At Gallaudet, I think we have a pretty representative split and it's nationwide as well. But what's interesting is I remember going through graduate school, looking at women professors with children. My advisor has 3 children and no one else did at all. So there was nobody else to look to. But I remember when I was all done with my education and ready to start a family, I sat down with my advisor and said, how did you do that? Because it's difficult having kids. So she talked to me about how she and her husband overlapped their schedules in a way that he could drop off the kids in the morning, so he was there in the early part, and how they collaborated and worked together. And I think her husband really gave up more than she did. She's a full professor. He's not. But they make those decisions together. So she shared with me about that. And she's done a great job with her children. One is in graduate school, another one now has a big sailing company in Canada, and the third one I'm not sure, but they're grown now, and it's hard to believe that they're off in college and beyond, because when I was doing my original internship, they were in middle school, and they're all grown up now. Another thing that I didn't realize about becoming a mother was during my pregnancy, it changed my experience in the lab. I had to be careful about exposure to chemicals. That meant that I had to direct the lab assistants and let them do more of the actual work. So the work was remote from me in a way that I hadn't had happen before. And that continued on when I was breastfeeding. I was used to just getting in there and working with the chemicals, and then I couldn't do it because I had to be very careful about exposure. Actually, I had more protective gear on when I was pregnant, really more than normal. Still, and I was doing some experiments, but, there were other things that I wouldn't touch at all, but a few things I did. So that delayed the process of some of the work I was doing a little bit. But I'm not at an R1 university where there would be that pressure to continue the research, I choose my research. So that gives me more flexibility.
But is a delay a bad thing? I mean, I would think that the results have to be dependable, and that takes time.
Well, sometimes when you have a grant, you have to finish in X number of years. And at that time, I had just gotten this grant, and it was my first NSF grant, and I needed to show my results. I was pregnant with my first child at the time, right at the end of it, and I was almost done with the experiments, but it put a pressure on me to finish on time because I had to show that I could finish on time. It was a lot of pressure.
Wow. But it did work out in the end, right?
Well, I did finish enough of the experiments to satisfy NSF, but I haven't published it, so yes and no.
Okay. So obviously you've experienced a lot of challenges. Can you give me an idea of something about what type of challenges would a woman specifically face in the field?
Well, I think for both men and women, science today is collaborative in a way that it didn't used to be. Back in the old days of, I discovered a star and I did that all by myself, those days are gone. That doesn't happen anymore. Today, science is collaborative. And that makes it harder for deaf people in some ways because of communication. But at the same time, you have to find the right people who are willing to work with your communication needs. So I do online chat instead of relay services because interpreters often misunderstand what we're talking about. And if we're on the phone, sometimes people will say, let's talk on the phone. And I'll say, we can talk through the relay service. However, we may get a good interpreter or we may not get such a good interpreter. How about an online chat instead? And most of the time they say yes to that. And actually, it's much easier, I think, on them as well, because when you're doing an online chat, you could be doing other things at the same time. So it's
Sure.
not as time consuming. So it's actually nice for everyone. But also, I think it's good to stay in a field where you can build relationships and build professional friendships and work with people who you respect. And the more you do that, the easier that collaboration gets over time.
So you mentioned that in the beginning you weren't exactly sure what you wanted to do. Did networking help you make that decision?
Well, I don't think that you need to choose your fields, your specialization so early in the process as people are pushed to do today. I mean, I don't pressure my students to make decisions about their specialization. No, I don't encourage that. I mean, biology in general is specialization enough, or chemistry, or even science. And then in graduate school, you can find your specialization. But I think the pressure today to specialize early, I don't support that. I think a good, broad foundation is good to have first, and then you can specialize. Actually, today, I think in our society, most work is specialized, and I think sometimes specializing too early is not great. That broad background gives you the opportunity to be able to communicate with other specialties. That's why I often say that I love liberal arts education. In so many ways, you get to take so many different classes, learn from so many different angles. I remember learning about fairy tales. And why Red Riding Hood had a red hood, things like that. So those things were instrumental to me becoming a more well-rounded person, and the importance of organizing data. Science people are used to hard numbers, statistics, and when we look at liberal arts, oftentimes we say, "Oh, that's fluff. It's not real data." But when you actually get exposed to social sciences, then you come to realize firsthand that they really do have data. There really is accuracy. There is scientific method there. It's a social science method, but at the same time, it is a scientific method. So that exposure, I think, is helpful. Later on, here's one example, a person who was talking about studying bears. The polar bears in Alaska. And of course, the scientists came in and injected the bears with something so that they could then follow them. And one of the social scientists thought to talk with the local people, the natives to the area, and explain what they were doing studying the polar bears. And the local people were pretty much against this process because they said, the way the polar bears act after you tag them is not how they normally act. Now, these are people who live with the polar bears, so they would know. So the social science and the social scientists and their interaction with the locals improved our work. And the science alone couldn't have done that. So there's where that collaboration, we can really appreciate what we have to offer one another. So if you specialize only in science and your thinking gets narrow, then your appreciation of the wider picture, like the fairy tales or art or music or architecture, those things have something to offer us. And they can be part of our work later on that we can't predict at the time. I don't want to see people get boxed in because the opportunities are endless. For example, there's a social environmentalist center where they are interested in visual learners. And I'm a visual learner, and so I have something to contribute there, my understanding of oceanography that as I've learned it as a visual learner. And again, because I'm not boxed in and say, well, all I do is oceanography, that doesn't apply to me, I'm able to have a broader perspective and contribute ideas and be collaborative in the ways that I've been talking about.
I really love your example about the polar bears. That makes things so clear. Wow. Well, let's see. Are there any other comments you would have for us? Anything else you'd like to share?
Well, I would just say that science is not an easy major. It's just not. You'll have times where you feel frustrated or struggle. But in the end, the achievement will be there. The rewards will come in the end. And you'll be able to appreciate that you've done something hard. And you'll be a scientist or an engineer or a mathematician who will change the world. I mean, we have a high demand for STEM people. And it doesn't matter, as the world progresses, that's where the advances come in technology and science. And also at the same time, as we advance in our fields, sometimes we feel, I do, like I don't know that much. And there's a perception that the more skilled we get, the more we'll know. But actually the opposite happens. The more I know, the less I know. So, but that's in any academic field.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming today. We very much enjoyed this opportunity to chat with you. Thank you, Dr. Caroline Solomon.
You're welcome.